Hi everyone, I'm Tess Ellender with Muller Engineering Company, and I'm going to walk you through CDOT's Risk and Resiliency tool, better known as the R&R tool. So the R&R tool has been built to determine benefit-cost ratios of different assets based on threat type, the likelihood of an event occurring, and the consequence to the owner and the user. The tool is a quantitative risk assessment to estimate the potential loss to an asset from a given risk and calculate the reduction in risk or benefit to the asset for mitigating that risk. The resulting benefit-cost ratios can be used to determine the best mitigation method for reducing risk to an asset before an event happens or for repairing an asset after it has been damaged. These results can be used as a supporting factor in pitching a proposed mitigation to both CDOT and FHWA for funding. So I'll now walk you through the tool and a few examples of it. So the R&R tool workbook has 3 different portions. It has a how-to sheet. It also has different asset sheets. And then finally, it has a benefit-cost ratio sheet as well. So the how-to sheet contains the general instructions for filling out the tool for all assets, with some asset-specific notes included as well. One important part that I want to point out is that you will need a separate sheet for no action and each mitigation option for whichever asset you are evaluating. So as you go through the steps in the How-To tab, it directs you on how to go ahead and set up this workbook, and it does direct you on adding those mitigation and no action sheets as well. I'll show you what this could end up looking like with an example towards the end of this demonstration. After you get the new workbook set up for your asset, you'll need to enter asset data into the yellow cells of the sheet. So that's this step 4 right here. And if we look at an example of the sheet, these are those yellow cells that I'm talking about. Only the yellow cells need to be filled out to be able to run the sheet, and all the outcomes will be calculated per the CDOT standard. If you would like to tailor any of the information from the standard, now's the time that you would do so. This could include changing things like the numbers in the vulnerability table on rockfall assets, as seen here, to better reflect your mitigation option. So next, you'll need to enter new detour route information, which you can do by using the detour route tool or by mapping a new route in Google Maps. The new added travel distance and times will be input into table 3.13 on your asset sheets, as seen right here, and it's labeled 3.13 regardless of which asset you're running the tool for. Once this is all completed, you'll then run the calculations on the benefit-cost ratio sheet. You'll enter the totals for the owner and user risks for both your no action and mitigation options. You'll then enter the price for replacing the asset and the price for installing the new mitigation measures. The delta of the 2 values will be automatically calculated in the sheet. And then lastly, you'll enter the expected lifespan of the mitigation option. And after you enter that expected lifespan of the mitigation option, the BC ratios will automatically populate based on CDOT standard formulas. A BC ratio of more than 1 indicates that the mitigation effort is worthwhile. And these are plugged in with just example numbers just to kind of show you how it all runs. And for this hypothetical mitigation option, we have a total BC ratio of 3.1, which means that it would be worthwhile to move forward with. So now I'd like to walk you through the layout of the asset sheets using the flood minor culvert as an example. For each asset, there's a flowchart on the right-hand side of the data that explains the details of how each step of the sheet works. Again, the only data that you need to enter to be able to run the tool are these yellow cells. Some you have to enter the data yourself and hard code it in. Some do have drop-down options. If you are required to pick a drop-down option, they will be, this cell will have a drop-down box for you. So scrolling down, the total owner and user risks that we mentioned earlier will show up in these white cells in step 6. Owner risk is the monetary risk to CDOT, while user risk is the monetary risk to the traveling public. These are presented both separately and combined in the BC ratio sheet, since some highways have an extremely high user risk, like I-70, which can skew the total BC value. Down below on the sheet is the additional information from the standard that can be tailored to your project if you'd like, as well as that table 3.13 where you would enter your new travel information. These tools can also be used to run BC ratios for post-fire debris flow events. There's a separate workbook for post-fire debris flow, since the tool can only run a few different types of assets for those post-fire debris flow events. Everything else about the tool is exactly the same. It works in the same way. We still have our how-to tabs, we still have our different asset tabs, and then we still have our benefit cost ratio tab. So now I'll walk you through an example of what using this tool could look like. These sheets will look a little different since they were run before the development of the current version of the tool, but everything still functions in the same way. So we'll look at an example of an asset evaluation on Highway 24. As you can see, along the flooded area, there were several assets that were affected. There was a portion of the roadway affected, as well as 5 different culverts. So for each of these 6 assets, we have both a no action and a mitigation sheet. So as you can see right here, these are all of our no action sheets, and then to the right are all of our mitigation sheets. I then created 2 more sheets totaling the no action and mitigation risk values just to make it a little bit easier for me to track personally. So that's what these totals are. So we have our totals, total risks for roadway and culvert, and then just add it all together for both mitigation and no action. Finally, these are used in the BC sheet to determine the benefit cost ratio. As you can see, with this example, it only costs $11,000 more to add in the new mitigation than it would be to replace the assets as is, but it results in an annual benefit of over $1.5 million. And we have an incredibly high BC ratio here, which means we should definitely implement these new mitigations. Now let's look at an I-70 example. This is one asset threat of rockfall on one portion of the roadway, but there are 3 mitigation options that were being evaluated. So here we still have our no action tab, but we also have a new mitigation tab for each of the different options. One for a concrete barrier, one for an attenuator, and one for a 3,000 kilojoule barrier. We then run the BC ratio for each of these options using the owner and user risk values, and the mitigation option with the highest BC ratio would be the preferred mitigation option. So that's an overview of CDOT's R&R tool. If you have any questions, you can also take a look at the CDOT standard, which kind of explains all of this in a little bit of a longer report form. If you have any questions regarding the Risk and Resiliency tool, please reach out to CDOT's resiliency staff.